Captain Jason Tanner stood at the edge of the wild, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth of the unknown planet. The sky above was dark, swirling with strange shifting clouds, as if the atmosphere itself had a mind of its own. His crew was behind him, moving cautiously through the thick alien forest, their eyes scanning the surroundings for anything that might pose a threat. The planet was uncharted, remote, and dangerous, but that was what they signed up for: exploration, discovery, the unknown. They had trained for this moment for years, and now, standing here in this foreign land, they were ready to face whatever came next. Jason was always the first to step into the unknown, his curiosity burning brighter than any fear. His team followed, silent and steady, as they moved deeper into the forest. The tall, jagged trees towered above them, their twisted branches blocking out much of the sun. The air was thick with humidity, and every breath felt like it was filled with the scent of something ancient and untamed. This planet was alive, in ways they could hardly understand. There were creatures here, some of them small, some enormous, and the sounds of the jungle echoed all around them. The team kept their weapons close, but Jason knew that in a place like this, no amount of technology could fully prepare them for the dangers they might face. "Stay sharp," Jason said, his voice low but steady as he signaled for the team to halt. The team obeyed without question, their eyes darting in every direction, waiting for any sign of movement. Jason's gaze swept across the landscape before him, scanning the underbrush for any signs of life. The mission was simple: explore the area, gather data, and return safely. But something told him that this mission would be far from ordinary. As they moved forward, Jason's sharp eyes caught something in the distance, a flicker of movement. It was small, quick, like a shadow flitting between the trees. His instincts kicked in. He motioned for the team to stop, his hand raised in the universal sign for caution. They all froze in place, their breaths held, waiting. Jason's heart raced. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The creature, barely visible through the thick foliage, was small and light on its feet, moving with an agility that defied the rules of the planet's environment. It darted between the trees, vanishing and reappearing as though it were testing them. It was fast, far faster than any creature Jason had ever encountered in his years of exploration. But it wasn't hostile. "At least, not yet. Stay back," Jason whispered to his team, his voice barely a breath. He slowly moved forward, his hand outstretched, trying to remain calm. He knew the rules of engagement. Never approach a creature unless absolutely necessary. But there was something about this one, something that pulled at him, like an unseen force that demanded attention. He crept closer, each step calculated, careful not to make a sound. The team followed, staying behind him, waiting for orders. As he moved forward, the creature came into clearer view. It wasn't large, but its features were striking. Its fur was a deep, silvery gray, almost metallic, and its eyes gleamed with an intelligence that sent a chill down Jason's spine. It was no ordinary animal. This was something different. Before Jason could take another step, the creature let out a high-pitched cry, a sound so sharp that it made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It wasn't an animal sound. It was a call for help, an alert. And in that moment, Jason realized that it wasn't alone. From the shadows of the trees, a massive form emerged. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he saw what it was: a gigantic creature, unlike anything he had imagined. It was covered in thick, furred skin, its massive paws leaving deep imprints in the soft ground. Its face was fierce, its eyes full of a powerful predatory intelligence. But what struck Jason the most was the way it carried itself. Its movements were slow and deliberate, as though it was in complete control of everything around it. The Tigress stood tall, her eyes never leaving Jason's. She was magnificent, almost regal in her stature, but beneath the grace was the unmistakable aura of danger. This was a creature that could tear through a tree with ease, a predator unlike any Jason had encountered before. And yet, despite its power, the Tigress did not attack. Jason's team froze. They had their weapons trained on the creature, but none of them dared to make a move. They had been trained to handle hostile alien species, but nothing had prepared them for this. Jason, however, knew that he couldn't let fear take hold. The Tigress wasn't attacking, but it was watching them with an intensity that made him feel as if he were being measured, weighed, judged. The cub, the creature that Jason had seen first, was now visible in the Tigress's presence. It was small, no more than a few weeks old, with its fur still soft and fine. Its large eyes were wide with fear, and it huddled against the Tigress's massive paw. The mother's gaze flicked back and forth between Jason and the cub, as though deciding whether to trust him or to destroy him. Jason took a deep breath and lowered his weapon. He had no desire to fight. He wasn't here to cause harm. He wasn't even sure how he could fight something so powerful. But one thing was clear. He had to help the cub. There was a bond between the two that couldn't be ignored, and in that moment, Jason made a decision. He couldn't just stand there and do nothing. He stepped forward, slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. The Tigress's gaze followed him, unblinking, but she made no move to stop him. Her immense size and strength were intimidating, but Jason knew that if he acted with care, he might be able to gain her trust. The cub let out a soft cry as Jason reached it, and he instinctively knelt down to check on it. He wasn't sure what kind of creature this was, but he had dealt with injured animals before. He gently prodded the cub, checking for signs of injury, and he felt a sense of relief when he realized that it was only frightened, not hurt. As he reached for his pack to pull out a food ration, the Tigress growled low in her throat. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The growl was not one of aggression, but it was a warning. He knew he had to be careful. This creature could easily overpower him with a single swipe of her paw. But as he stood back up, holding the ration in his hand, he offered it to the cub. The Tigress watched him closely, her eyes narrowing as she observed his every move. Jason held his breath, waiting for a reaction. Slowly, the cub sniffed the ration, its small nose twitching as it hesitated. The Tigress didn't move. She merely watched, her intense gaze never wavering. Jason extended his arms slowly, still offering the ration, and then, after what felt like an eternity, the cub took a tentative bite. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate as the cub ate, its small, sharp teeth nibbling at the food. The Tigress did not interfere. Instead, she stood still, her eyes softening ever so slightly, as though she had made a decision of her own. Jason stood up, his heart still racing, but he knew that this was a fragile moment. He didn't know what would happen next, but he couldn't turn back. He had protected the cub, and now, it seemed, he was under the protection of the Tigress. Over the next few days, Jason Tanner's life aboard the exploration ship began to feel far away. He no longer saw the galaxy as something distant and untouchable. Now it was a living, breathing entity, teeming with creatures both beautiful and terrifying. The planet had become more than just an exploration site. It had become a place of shared understanding, a bond forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. The Tigress, who Jason had come to think of as Aethera, after a name from one of his many star maps, had not left his side since that first encounter. At first, he thought it might just be a momentary curiosity, a brief watchful gaze before she would retreat to the wilds again. But to his surprise, she remained, pacing nearby, never straying too far. Even when Jason set up a temporary shelter to rest and regain energy, she was always in view, watching from the edges of the clearing with a presence that was both comforting and unsettling. Jason had never been afraid of animals, not in the way some people were. His past missions had involved encounters with strange creatures, some of which could be deadly. But there was something about the Tigress that made his heart race not with fear, but with a deep sense of respect. She was no ordinary creature. He could feel that in the air around her. Her movements were precise, calculated, Every step she took was measured, as though she knew exactly where she was going, exactly how to make her presence known. The cub, on the other hand, seemed more like an innocent child in a strange world. It would dart around Jason's camp during the day, investigating everything with wide eyes, sometimes nipping at the straps of his gear or tugging at his jacket. The cub's energy was contagious. There was something pure about the way it approached the world, a fresh perspective on everything it encountered. Jason found himself laughing more than he had in years, his heart lightened by the cub's innocent curiosity. But the tigress, Athera, remained the center of Jason's thoughts. He had never been in such close proximity to a creature that commanded so much power and yet displayed such restraint. Her demeanor had shifted since that first moment of uncertainty. A hard edge in her eyes had softened, her growls had become less frequent, replaced by low, soothing purrs when she was content. Jason couldn't help but wonder if she had begun to see him not as an intruder, but as an ally. Someone who would not harm her cub. Someone who might even understand her need for protection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery orange glow across the dense jungle, Jason sat near the campfire, carefully inspecting his equipment. He had learned the hard way that a careless mistake could spell disaster on a planet like this, where the environment itself seemed to be as dangerous as the creatures that roamed it. The fire crackled, and he could hear the soft rustling of leaves in the trees. He didn't need to turn around to know that Athera was there. Her presence was like a shadow, always hovering just at the edge of his vision. The cub, now full and content from its meal, lay curled up beside the fire, its small body twitching every now and then in a dreamlike state. Jason couldn't help but smile at the sight. In a way, the cub reminded him of a child, innocent, unaware of the dangers that surrounded it. Jason's thoughts briefly turned to his own life, to the crew waiting on the ship, but he quickly pushed them aside. There was no time for homesickness out here in the wilds. He had a job to do, but his mind kept drifting back to the tigress. There was something about her that unsettled him. It wasn't just the sheer physical power she possessed, though. That alone was enough to make any man pause. It was something deeper, a quiet understanding between them that was difficult to put into words. Jason had spent his life dealing with all manner of alien species, some of them hostile, some of them indifferent. But this was different. Athera was not just another creature. She was a mother, protecting her young with an intensity that was both frightening and awe-inspiring. As Jason was lost in thought, a faint sound reached his ears. It was a low growl, almost imperceptible at first. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Athera moving, her sleek form gliding through the shadows like a phantom. Her head was lowered, her ears pinned back slightly, as if she were listening for something. Jason's pulse quickened. He had been so absorbed in his thoughts that he hadn't noticed the change in the air. Something was coming. The cub stirred beside him, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. It let out a soft whimpering cry before trying to stand, its tiny legs wobbling. Athera was already moving, her muscles coiled with tension as she stalked toward the edge of the camp, her eyes locked on the darkening jungle ahead. Jason didn't need any further signs. He had been in enough dangerous situations to recognize when something was amiss. He quickly stood, grabbing his blaster from the ground and checking its charge. It was then that he saw it. Shapes moving in the distance, shadows flitting between the trees. There were more creatures out there, lurking in the darkness. The growls grew louder, sharper, as if the forest itself was being stirred into a frenzy. Jason's grip on his weapon tightened. He wasn't sure if the creatures were predators or scavengers, but the tigress was already in motion, her massive form bounding forward with an agility that belied her size. She let out a loud, powerful roar, a warning that echoed through the jungle. Jason followed her with his eyes, his heart racing in his chest. The creatures in the darkness hesitated, and Jason could see them now, sleek, shadowy figures with glowing eyes, their bodies low to the ground as they moved in on the camp. They were not as large as Athera, but they were quick, their movements almost fluid as they circled, preparing to strike. Athera wasn't about to wait for them to make the first move. With a growl that shook the ground beneath her, She lunged, her massive paws tearing through the air with deadly precision. The creatures scattered, retreating into the underbrush. But the tigress was relentless. She pursued them, her growls echoing through the trees. Jason didn't hesitate. He knew he couldn't let her face these creatures alone. His instincts kicked in as he sprinted toward the edge of the camp, raising his weapon and firing into the darkness. The shot rang out, a bright flash of light cutting through the night. But the creatures were already gone, scattering like shadows into the night. The forest fell silent, save for the distant growl of the tigress as she returned to the camp. Athera reappeared from the shadows, her eyes glowing in the dim firelight. Her fur was bristling, but she was unharmed. The creatures had backed down, at least for now. Jason exhaled, his chest tight from the rush of adrenaline. He lowered his weapon, but he didn't let his guard down. He had seen the way the creatures had moved. There was no doubt in his mind that they would be back, but for now, they were safe. The cub, still by the fire, had remained calm throughout the entire ordeal. It seemed to sense that its mother was in control of the situation. As the tigress walked back to the fire, the cub crawled over to her, nuzzling her side in a gesture of comfort. Athera looked down at her cub, her eyes softening for a moment before she turned back to Jason. There was something in that gaze, something that told him the tigress saw him not just as an ally, but as someone who had earned her trust. She wasn't protecting him out of obligation. She was doing it because she had decided that he was worthy of her loyalty. Jason knelt by the fire, his heart still racing, but a sense of peace settling over him. The bond between him and Athera had grown stronger in that moment. He wasn't just a stranger to her anymore. He was part of her world, part of her protection. And somehow, in a strange way, Jason felt like he belonged here, in this wild, untamed place. As the days passed on the alien planet, Jason Tanner felt himself slipping into a strange rhythm, one that he had never quite experienced before. The wild, untamed world around him was as dangerous as it was beautiful, and yet there was something deeply calming about the bond he had formed with Athera, the tigress, and her cub. Life on the planet had become a constant cycle of survival, exploration, and quiet moments of unexpected companionship. Athera had stopped pacing around him like she once had. She no longer lingered on the outskirts of his camp, watching him from a distance with her piercing golden eyes. Instead, she had grown more comfortable in his presence. The tigress moved freely now, often sitting by the fire or lying near Jason's camp as he worked, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. Her muscles rippled beneath her thick coat, but there was a calmness in her demeanor that Jason had not seen before. The bond between them had solidified in ways Jason couldn't have imagined when he first encountered her. It wasn't just the trust that had developed between them. It was something deeper. There were no words to describe it, but Jason could feel it in the air. The tigress had chosen him. She had accepted him, not just as an observer of her world, but as a part of it. She had let him into her space, her life, and in return, Jason had done the same. The cub, now growing stronger with each passing day, had become an ever-present reminder of the fragile life they were all trying to protect. It followed Jason around the camp, its small, curious eyes constantly scanning its surroundings, learning from both its mother and the human who had saved it. Jason couldn't help but smile every time the cub nudged at his equipment or playfully swatted at his boots. In its innocence, it found joy in the simplest things, and that joy had slowly worked its way into Jason's own heart. One afternoon, as the sun bathed the jungle in its golden light, Jason found himself lost in thought while surveying the dense foliage. He had come to know this part of the planet well. There was a certain peace to it, a silence that surrounded him when he was alone in the wild. The quiet was only interrupted by the occasional calls of unseen creatures, the rustling of leaves in the wind, or the soft purring of Athera, who was never far behind. Jason's mind wandered back to Earth. It had been months since they had left, months since he had spoken to his crew or anyone from his past life. The ship was still out there, waiting for their return, but something about the world on this planet made him feel disconnected from everything he once knew. He wasn't homesick. Not exactly. It was more like the world he had left behind no longer mattered as much. Here, in this wild, untamed place, there was only the present moment, the world he shared with Aethera and her cub. He turned and saw the Tigress standing at the edge of the clearing, watching him with that same calculating gaze. Her fur rippled in the breeze, her massive body standing tall and strong against the backdrop of the jungle. There was a quiet strength about her now that Jason admired. She had proven to him that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about protecting what mattered, about trusting others when it was most difficult. Jason's thoughts were interrupted by a low growl from Aethera. It was subtle, but enough to stir something deep in his gut. His heart skipped a beat as he realized that the Tigress was on alert again. The growl came from deep in her chest, a warning that something was wrong. Jason's hand immediately went to his blaster, his fingers instinctively tightening around it. He had learned to trust Aethera's instincts. She had proven time and again that she knew this planet better than he ever could. If she was growling, then there was something out there, something he needed to be ready for. He scanned the trees, his eyes darting through the underbrush, trying to spot any movement. It was then that he saw it. Shapes moving just beyond the line of trees, shadows creeping along the ground. More creatures were approaching. Jason could feel the tension in the air, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. His pulse quickened, but he didn't panic. He had learned to remain calm, to trust his training. He turned to Aethera, who was already in motion, her body coiled and ready for action. Her gaze was focused, her ears pinned back slightly as she moved toward the threat. The cub, sensing the change in the atmosphere, scurried to its mother's side, staying close to the Tigress's powerful frame. Jason moved to the cub's side, his hand still gripping his blaster. He didn't want to fire unless he had to. He knew that Aethera could handle herself, but the creatures surrounding them didn't seem to be backing down. The creatures came into view, a pack of sleek, shadowy figures, their bodies long and lithe, their eyes glowing eerily in the dim light. They were circling, moving like a coordinated team, their movements so fluid and fast that it was hard to keep track of them. Jason's heart raced as he realized these were no ordinary predators. They were intelligent, organized, and possibly even hunting in packs. Jason didn't wait. He raised his weapon and fired into the air, the blast ringing out through the stillness of the jungle. The creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes flashing in his direction, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they seemed to grow bolder, their eyes narrowing as they advanced. Aethera was the first to charge. With a roar, she lunged at the nearest creature, her claws extended and her teeth bared. The speed and precision of her movements took Jason's breath away. She was like a force of nature, unstoppable in her fury. The creatures scattered, but Aethera was relentless. She swiped at one, knocking it into the air, her powerful limbs sending it crashing to the ground with a loud thud. Jason didn't wait to see how the fight unfolded. He knew Aethera could handle herself, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He fired again, taking down one of the creatures that was creeping closer to the cub. The blast struck its side, sending it tumbling into the underbrush. The rest of the creatures hesitated, looking between each other, clearly unsure of how to deal with the Tigress and the human who fought beside her. But Aethera wasn't finished. She charged again, moving faster than any creature Jason had ever seen. Her growls were low and fierce as she tore into the remaining creatures, sending them fleeing into the jungle. Within moments, the clearing fell silent again, the only sound being the crackle of the fire and the heavy breathing of the Tigress. Jason lowered his weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone in this fight. Aethera had proven time and again that she was a protector, a warrior in her own right, and now, for the first time, Jason had fought alongside her. They were a team. He could see it clearly now. The bond between them had become something stronger than just a shared moment of survival. It was a partnership forged in the wilds of an alien world. where trust and loyalty were the only things that mattered. The cub, watching its mother return victorious, let out a small, relieved chirp. Athera looked down at the cub, her expression softening as she nuzzled it gently with her massive head. Jason watched the interaction with a quiet sense of awe. He had never seen a creature like Athera before, but he had come to understand that there was more to her than just raw power. She was a protector, a mother, and now she had accepted him as part of her world. As the fire crackled and the night settled around them, Jason knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more dangers to face, more challenges to overcome, but for the first time since landing on this planet, Jason felt a sense of peace. He was no longer just a man lost in the unknown. He was part of something greater, something wild and untamed. And with Athera by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The days blurred together as Jason continued to adjust to his new reality on the alien planet. Life had become a strange mixture of routine and unpredictability. There were moments of calm, where he and Athera would simply sit by the fire, the jungle alive with distant sounds of unknown creatures. But those moments were always fleeting. The wild world they had found themselves in was never truly still. The planet had a pulse, and that pulse was both beautiful and dangerous. Jason had become accustomed to the Tigress's presence. Athera was no longer just a protector. She had become a companion. Her loyalty had never wavered since that first moment when she chose to trust him. Jason had learned to read the subtle cues in her body language, how her ears twitched when she was alert, the way her tail flicked when she was ready to spring into action. He had learned her rhythms, and in turn, he had found his own place in the rhythm of her world. But it wasn't just the tigress that had changed him. The cub, now growing rapidly, had become more than just an innocent creature. It was a part of this world and a part of their world. The cub had taken to following Jason around like a shadow, always curious, always learning. There were moments when Jason would catch it staring at him with wide, intelligent eyes, as though it was trying to understand him, trying to make sense of this strange human who had become so important to its survival. The tigress, Athera, was patient with the cub, but Jason could see the pride in her eyes. She had done everything in her power to protect it, and now she had chosen to protect him as well. Jason had never felt the weight of that responsibility more than he did in these moments. He wasn't just a stranger to them anymore. He was a part of their family, and they were his family. In a world so foreign and unpredictable, that connection was something he never took for granted. One day, as the sun reached its peak in the sky, Jason set out for a scouting mission. It was routine by now. He had learned to map the terrain and collect data on the flora and fauna of the planet. The information would be invaluable to his crew back on the ship, and it was his responsibility to ensure that they would be able to make a safe return to civilization. But as he ventured further into the jungle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. The air felt thicker, as though it was waiting for something to happen. Athera, as always, was by his side, her large form moving with the grace of a predator. She was more than just a silent observer now. Her presence was a constant reminder that he wasn't alone. The cub, on the other hand, had stayed behind, playing near their makeshift camp, but Jason knew it would never be far. The bond between them all was unspoken, but undeniable. As Jason pushed through the dense underbrush, his mind wandered again to the people back home, to the crew that had entrusted him with this mission. He wondered how they were faring, whether they were waiting for him to return with news or whether they had already written him off as lost. He pushed the thought away. It didn't matter. He was here now, in this moment, and he couldn't afford to dwell on what lay beyond the jungle. A sudden noise snapped him out of his thoughts. It was a deep, low growl, something that sent a shiver down his spine. Athera's ears perked up instantly, and she turned toward the sound, her body tense. Jason followed her gaze, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew that growl. It was the same sound he had heard before when the predators had attacked the camp. Something was coming, and it wasn't alone. The growl grew louder and Jason's heart skipped a beat. He knew they had to act quickly. He glanced at Athera, who had already begun moving toward the sound, her muscles rippling with anticipation. There was no time to waste. They had to protect the cub. Jason felt the familiar weight of his blaster in his hand, but he knew it wasn't enough. He wasn't as powerful as Athera, and there was only so much he could do against an unknown force. The jungle seemed to close in around them as they moved, the thick foliage making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Jason's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. What kind of creatures were out there? Were they the same predators that had attacked before, or was there something else at play? The growl grew closer, and Jason's grip on his blaster tightened. He could feel the pressure building in his chest. They couldn't let these creatures get to the cub. Athera moved with a fluidity that was both graceful and terrifying. Her body was a blur of movement as she darted through the trees, her eyes locked on whatever was coming. Jason followed her, every sense on high alert. It wasn't until they reached a small clearing that they saw what was causing the noise. A massive creature, unlike anything Jason had seen before. The creature was enormous, its body covered in thick, jagged armor that made it look like something out of a nightmare. Its eyes glowed a bright, unnatural red, and its claws were long and sharp, capable of cutting through metal with ease. It stood at least 10 feet tall, its hulking form towering over them as it let out a deafening roar. Jason's heart raced. This was no ordinary predator. It was something more, something far more dangerous. But he didn't have time to think. Athera was already charging, her massive paws slamming into the ground with each powerful step. The creature roared again, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it lunged at her, its claws outstretched. Jason fired his blaster, aiming for the creature's vulnerable spots, but the shots bounced harmlessly off its armor. He had no idea how to defeat this beast. His training had never prepared him for something like this. But Athera was relentless. She dodged the creature's swipes, her movements a blur of speed and precision. She managed to land a blow to the creature's side, but it barely flinched. The battle was far from over. Jason knew he had to do something. He couldn't just stand by and watch as Athera fought alone. He had to protect her, protect them both. He looked around the clearing, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes fell on a large rock nearby, and in a split second, he grabbed it, hurling it at the creature's face. The rock struck the beast's eye, and for the first time, the creature let out a pained howl. It staggered back, momentarily disoriented. Athera took advantage of the momentary distraction. With a final, ferocious roar, she launched herself at the creature, sinking her claws into its exposed neck. The creature thrashed, trying to throw her off, but Athera held firm. Jason could see the power in her grip, the raw strength that had allowed her to survive in this harsh world. It wasn't long before the creature finally went still. Athera stood over it, panting heavily, her chest rising and falling with each breath. Jason approached cautiously, his heart still racing. He had never seen her fight like that before. She was a warrior, fierce and unrelenting in her desire to protect, and now, more than ever, Jason understood the bond between them. She wasn't just protecting her cub, she was protecting him too. As they made their way back to the camp, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the battle they had just fought was a turning point. The world they lived in was a constant struggle for survival, but with Athera by his side, Jason knew they could face whatever came next. He wasn't just a man on an alien planet anymore. He was part of this world, part of this family. Athera, the Tigress, had chosen him, and Jason had chosen her. They were more than just allies now. They were bound by something deeper, something that couldn't be broken. They were a team, a family, and together they would face whatever the future held. Whatever dangers came their way, Jason knew that he would always have Athera by his side. The bond between them was unspoken, but it was stronger than anything he had ever known. In the vastness of space, in the wilds of an alien planet, Jason had found something he had never expected. A connection, a family, a purpose, and he would protect it with everything he had.